Alright YouTube, I'm Jerry, it's Egypt.
Welcome to day 11 of our Egypt honeymoon. Waking up to these views of the Nile was an incredible experience. This is the Sonesta Nubian Hotel, situated on the outskirts of Aswan, right next to the River Nile. It manages to intertwine luxury and traditional Nubian styles perfectly to become an absolutely stunning place to stay. It even has its own crocodile pond, so if you want to hold one, you can do in the evenings. First stop on today's agenda is the High Dam with our tour guide Andro. Here we get a view of the Low Dam as we pass by on the drive. We are now at the High Dam, and when you look north, you can see the River Nile. This dam was built between 1960 and 1970 by Russia and Egypt, and they use it to generate electricity and to control the water level for agriculture. To the south of the High Dam, you get to see Lake Nasser, which is 35 kilometers wide at its widest point, 550 kilometers long and 160 meters deep, making it one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. Even though there are positives to this dam, it unfortunately displaced over 100,000 Nubians, and they even had to move temples to new locations so they weren't swallowed up by Lake Nasser. An example of this is Philae Temple that can be seen from the dam, and it's one of the unfortunate casualties of the dam itself. This temple had to be cut into 13,000 pieces and then moved to the new point by the edge of the lake. While you're on the dam, you can find these images of its construction and some of the images of temples that had to be moved. Who knows what other relics lay at the bottom of the lake, never to be discovered. As we left the High Dam, we drove past this Soviet-Egyptian friendship monument that's in the shape of a lotus flower. We are now on our way to Philae Temple. To get to Philae Temple, you have to take a boat ride to Agilka Island. Philae is one of the temples that needed to be moved from its original place due to the Low Dam that was built by the British in the late 1800s. On the boat, you can see another traditional Nubian hotel on the shore. Getting to see Philae Temple from the water gives you some mixed emotions. It's incredible to see it still standing, but it's a massive shame that you can't see it in its original location. It's crazy to think that where it stands now used to be a hilltop. Without UNESCO, this temple would be at the bottom of the lake. It was cut up into 50,000 pieces so it could be moved to this new location. Approaching the dock is an insane experience, with boats absolutely everywhere carrying tourists to and from the site. Philae Temple was finished around 280 BC during the reign of Ptolemy II. However, construction started with Nectanebo I in 380 to 362 BC. It's also known as the Temple of Isis, and it's dedicated to Isis, Osiris and Horus. There are many images of Hathor here as well, due to it telling the story of Isis bringing Osiris back to life so she can be impregnated and give birth to Horus. As you wander around the temple, you'll find loads of carved lines on the columns and walls. These are from Napoleon's soldiers sharpening swords on the stones. I can't imagine the audacity you would have to find such a structure like this and think it's appropriate to use the ancient structures to sharpen weapons for battle. As you go through the main entrance to the temple, you'll even find a message on the wall written by Napoleon himself. The Egyptian carvings on the wall of this temple are in a surprisingly good condition considering how many people have passed through this location over time. These 7 pillars on the left of the temple are the edge of the birthhouse and have Hathor on top of them. These pillars are depicting the first 7 days after childbirth, with the face closest to the temple on the right looking worried and getting gradually happier as you go further away from the temple, until she has a huge smile on her face on the last pillar, signifying the gradual acceptance that the child is going to be okay. As you enter the hypostyle hall of this temple, you are surrounded by pillars. Some of these pillars have been graffitied with the mark of the Coptic Christians that took residence in this temple, and they converted it into a church. You'll even find a Coptic altar in this hall, with all the Egyptian carvings destroyed behind it as they were seen as blasphemy by the new residents. Like we've seen in multiple temples before this one, the symbols of the Ankh and the Was scepter are plastered all over the walls. Also, like other temples, this has a sanctuary, and this was the first part of the temple to be built, and it has a very precisely cut altar in the middle of it, including the same distinct characteristics of objects much earlier than the rest. Only the king and the high priests were ever allowed to use this room when it was properly being used. You'll find quite a lot of defacement of carvings in this temple, as later civilizations believed that if you defaced the carvings, you take away the power of these gods. In the temple specifically dedicated to Hathor, you'll even find some depictions of different musical instruments on the walls. Here is a temple dedicated to Trajan, the Roman emperor. It was constructed between 98 and 117 AD. When you walk through this temple, you'll see the black pillars in the water, and these show you the initial location of this site. It appears that blocks have been taken from here too, just like in Kamombo. This could have been the work of Muhammad Ali as well, but it's difficult to know for sure. As we sit in the cafe waiting for our boat back, we notice that there's so many cats on this island. However, no one knows exactly how they got here. During the busy season in Egypt, all the boats you see are in use, so I can't begin to imagine how busy it gets here, and I'm very grateful that we came during this time of year. It was only a 15-minute drive from here to get to our next location, the Aswan Quarry, home to the Unfinished Obelisk. This quarry is another one of those sites that's ended up right in the middle of the city as the population build their homes and businesses up around it. It was the source of much of the granite we see in temples, statues and pyramids all over Egypt. There are tool marks all over this quarry from many different civilizations with many different capabilities, ranging from stone hammers to wooden wedges to the very peculiar scoop marks that we'll see closer to the Unfinished Obelisk itself. When we were here, the temperature got to 42 degrees C or roughly 108 degrees Fahrenheit, and with no shade and a mountain to climb, it's not for the faint-hearted. The Unfinished Obelisk is estimated to weigh 1,200 tons, which is the equivalent to around 100 double-decker buses, and the ancient Egyptians wouldn't have even started a project like this if they didn't have the capability to move such an object, which is absolutely astounding. Another thing that's absolutely insane is the idea that this obelisk was supposed to end up in Karnak, which is over 200 kilometers away. So how they were supposed to move something this heavy that far is absolutely mind-boggling. This obelisk would have stood at a whopping 42 meters tall and would have completely shadowed all other obelisks that are currently in Egypt, with Hatshepsut's obelisk in Karnak being the current tallest at a height of 30 meters. That's 2/3 the height of the Colossi of Memnon taller. This obelisk was apparently carved during the time of Hatshepsut's reign in roughly 1500 BC, but was abandoned as it developed a crack, but it wasn't discovered until 1922 by Reginald Engelbach. The Unfinished Obelisk is one that makes many people ask many questions, the scoop marks being one of them. To do this by hand with pounding stones really doesn't make any sense, and it looks like the stone has literally been scooped out by some kind of machine. There are also scoop marks all over the floor, so whatever tool was used, it was used quite often to remove quite a lot of stone. Another thing that makes me question the dating is once you're on top of the obelisk, you can look to the other side of the quarry and you can see some pre-dynastic style drawings of birds in a location that was apparently carved out by the quarriers to make way for a dock to transport the obelisks by boat. But this gap must have been their first for the pre-dynastic civilizations to draw those images in the first place. This looks suspiciously like that of an obelisk, almost like a huge one had already been removed and transported somewhere else. Begging the question, were these obelisks actually carved before the pre-dynastic civilization ever arrived in Aswan? You can find dolerite pounding stones all over this site, which is why we're told that they were the tools used to create this immense obelisk. But that just raises even more questions. These pounding stones are actually pretty fragile and break often, so it's strange that these have been labelled as the tools used to create such scoop marks. The idea that they would rub the pounding stones on the rock to make it as smooth and polished as the example we've seen all around Egypt seems absolutely mental. Here I am testing the pounding stone method. Makes me question it even further. This example stone has been sitting here for 10 years, with people trying to carve it out every single day, and to my observation, it hasn't really disappeared that much at all. At this point, me and our guide jumped down to get a closer look at the obelisk, and along the wall there appears to be even more scoop marks, which just adds even more doubt that it was the pounding stones that produced this result. I even spoke to the guide about the fact that no one can produce these scoop marks using these stones, and he even doubted the method, stating the idea that some believe it may have even been some kind of laser or metal device used to make these marks. And then we had a chuckle about how metal machines wouldn't last out in the open for thousands of years due to rust, and how the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. As you walk down the other side of the quarry, you can see the evidence of the swollen wood method of quarrying. This is where you make a crack, then you fill the crack with sycamore wood, and then you wet the wood. As it expands, it breaks the rock away from its home, which is a much more primitive way of quarrying compared to the capability of whoever made the scoop marks. Closer to the exit, you'll find even more scoop marks on some of the quarry walls. These marks are absolutely all over the place. After such a hot and sweaty day climbing around, it was time to get back to our hotel and relax with the crocodiles. It was a lovely experience having dinner on the edge of the Nile, watching the sunset. Thanks for joining me on this trip to Philae and the quarry. We've got one more day out in Egypt on the way, so don't forget to come back.